Good afternoon. Welcome to the Economic Development and Natural Resources Subcommittee of Senate Finance and Appropriations. I'm Senator Marsden. To my right is Senator Favola. To my left, Senator Stewart. Senator Servell will be along shortly. And we have some presentations today. We're going to start with the overview of the Department of Conservation and Recreations, affectionately known as DCR. And my good friend Matt Wells will make the presentation. Mr. Director, welcome to the subcommittee.
Talk to the people in the audience. They think they're going to get a chance to speak. And
There we go. Can you hear me? This feels a lot more formal than sitting around a conference room in the conference table in a subcommittee room. Again, Matt Wells, Director of the Department of Conservation and Recreation. Appreciate the opportunity to provide an agency update for you today. I've got some of my team here with me, my deputy directors. They'll handle any hard questions that you have. Just a quick, very high-level overview of the agency. Obviously, a lot of people know us as the state parks folks. Certainly a lot more to the agency than that. Our Natural Heritage Program, which is the Commonwealth's lead biodiversity program. We handle many land conservation programs. Planning and Recreation Resources is point on a lot of federal grant programs. Soil and Water Conservation works with our 47 soil and water districts on ag cost share. We regulate 2,500 dams, have a lot of responsibility for floodplain management, including some of the major flood funds that the Commonwealth has, resilience planning, and the Office of Environmental Education. Just a real high-level overview of the agency's budget across the coming biennium proposed appropriation of $900 million. The majority of that is pass-through and grant funding, so our operating budget is closer to $200 million. You can see there's been some significant growth in the agency over the past couple of years in terms of budget. That's primarily a function of ag cost share and the flood funds. We have, in addition to the 542 authorized full-time positions, we have about 1,500 part-time positions, primarily in state parks. We are very heavily reliant on part-time positions, quite a few 1,500-hour employees, plus seasonal workers. We are relying on them. That does impact the agency's budget. When you all provide raises to career staff, we find the money to give raises to the hourly folks ourselves from our own revenues. It's important to bring them along. When minimum wage goes up, we typically only get about 60% of the fiscal impact of that increase in appropriation, and so we have to go find the balance of that as well. So I tend to divide the agency into a land side and a water side. So we'll start with the land side first with state parks. Just a quick overview of our existing footprint. I think the three of you all are fairly familiar with that. We opened our 42nd state park in October at Sweet Run up there in Loudoun County. So new, we haven't even colored in the little tree yet. We've got 3 more parks on the horizon: Culpeper Battlefields in Culpeper that'll open middle of this year, Hayfields Farm in Highland County, and then Mayo River down in Henry County. All told about 75,000 acres, 750 miles of trails, 1,600 campsites, 300 cabins, and a bunch of yurts. Annual operating budget is about $60 million. About half of that is self-generated. So looking at visitation, this is a slide that I showed last year. This is from 2019 to 2022. As you can expect, it peaks in the summer with kind of a head and shoulders pattern there. Like most outdoor recreation opportunities, we saw quite a bit of visitation increase during COVID, and then that tailed off as more stuff opened up. But the gist was that people went outside, they liked it, they decided to come back out, but we did see some leveling off of visitation, which we expected. So we ended in 2022 higher than we were prior to the pandemic, but lower than we were at its peak. So it turns out that once folks got back inside, they said, hey, this is kind of lame. We want to go back outside to a state park. And so our visitation last year was over 8 million, which was greater than the height of the pandemic. This is fantastic. This is part of our mission, is to get people outdoors, but it also means that we are really pushing at the seams in terms of what we can handle in capacity. One other thing that we track in addition to overall attendance is our program attendance, and in particular our educational, our interpretive programming. A large part of the agency's mission is educational. I think we have the opportunity to leverage our footprint and our expertise to deliver a best-in-class outdoor natural resources educational experience. The bottom line is people protect what they care about, and they care about what they understand. And so we have really leaned into this. You can see our active and passive interpretation numbers have grown here. We think that there is more room to grow in the future. and certainly something that we are focusing in on. We just hired our first chief of education and interpretation to help drive these from the central office perspective. Looking at revenue, and just to flag that this is in fiscal years, whereas the visitation was in calendar years. Again, as a reminder, this is self-generated revenue. This covers a little bit more than half of the state park's operating costs. For fiscal 23, roughly flat from fiscal 22. We did see some softening of revenues associated with cabins, camping, and parking. The bump that you see in admissions from 22 to 23 is really more of an accounting thing, where we started logging admission registration to Natural Bridge differently once we paid off the loan. So that sort of nets out in the wash. We are seeing a softening in parking fees as well, which is something that we are keeping an eye on, certainly as we have expanded, I think, some more free parking availability. That has started to tail off, and certainly something that we're going to continue watching. But I will say fiscal 24 to date, parking is tailing back up. Merchandise is going up as well. Swimming is up 45% in fiscal 23. We reopened the pool at Pocahontas, and that's gone well. So I think we continue to see opportunities to generate additional revenue and to strengthen merchandise sales. We will continue to see some softening in cabin revenue as we take some offline, some permanently, because of changing conditions at Westmoreland, for example, where they're not safe where they are anymore, or we're taking them offline to repair them. We have budgeted for that so that we can absorb some of that revenue loss. So looking at the economic impact of state parks, certainly significant in the Commonwealth, all told in 2022. Almost $480 million in economic activity stimulated. $364 million of that was fresh money. Most of that from, out of the $300 million in total visitor spending that is in that number, about a third of it is from out of state. We continue to have a really good ROI for state parks. So every dollar in general funds that you all invest in the system returns $15.21 in fresh money, and $1.07 in state and local taxes, support almost 4,000 jobs. As you can see here, what really drives the economic impact are overnight guests, and in particular, non-resident overnight guests. They tend to buy more things while they're there. So as you might imagine, based on the visitation numbers and based on the economic impact numbers, outdoor recreation is popular in the Commonwealth. These are some results from a survey that we did for the upcoming Virginia Outdoors Plan that'll be released later this week. Later this year. This was a scientific survey. So 82% of respondents said that access to outdoor recreation is very important. 91% said that they supported the state spending public funds to acquire lands to prevent the loss of natural areas, and 70% supported increased state spending for outdoor recreation. So certainly broad support from across the Commonwealth, very solid numbers there. Just one thing that I find interesting, people really like cabins. They tend to stay overnight if there are cabins, and again, those overnight guests tend to drive the economic impact. And so while cabins are certainly more expensive for us to build and to maintain, we are trying to give the people what they want, and cabins fits that. So how are we handling meeting the demand and the influx of people? What do things look like from a capacity standpoint? These are four graphs that I think about a lot. So on the left there, as you're looking at the page, is sort of a measure of day use. So only 10–11% of folks who visited a state park left due to overcrowding in the last year. That's good. But 57% avoided visiting a trail or a park because of crowding. That's not great. And I think those of you who are around parks like Lee, Sylvania or Lake Anna know that if you're trying to get into one of those in the summer, good luck. You better get there really, really early. So we do have parks that have significant day use constraints. On the right, as you're looking at the page, is more of an overnight picture. So 20% of respondents looked into making an overnight reservation at a state park in the last 12 months. Considering that this is a statewide survey, 1 in 5 is pretty good. I think it also shows to me that we've got quite a bit of addressable market that we could continue to go after. But if you look at that graph on the bottom, 55% of the folks that tried to make a reservation weren't able to do that on their latest attempt. The vast majority of those folks, because their preferred dates weren't available. And so the catch here is that we've got a very popular product that people want to visit. We believe we've got room to grow and get more people into the system, but we might not necessarily have the capacity to handle those folks. So as we look towards the future and how we want our park system to look in their second century, they turn 100 in 2036, we've begun prioritizing some known service gaps into a few different buckets. To the degree that more funding becomes available, and I know there's a lot of conversation around that, these are some of the areas that we would probably look to prioritize.
Thank you, Matt. I have a question from Senator Stewart.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Matt, going back to your pie charts,
Mm-hmm.
I was just curious, and I wasn't quick enough before you jumped to the next topic. Do you do that park-wide, or is there a breakdown based upon specific parks, trying to figure out which ones we need to help to be able to answer the call for folks who want to use them?
So we've got statistics by park. The survey stats have a regional breakdown. I think, and polls, the more granular you get, the bigger the margin of error gets. But we've got statistics that sort of we use to judge carrying capacity. Some of it's just common sense. If you go and you see a line out the door, then we've maybe got some problems there as well. We can get you some breakdowns.
So the parks that we need to expand or the ones that are having trouble visiting, I guess is my question.
Yeah.
Okay.
Chairman,
Senator Survey.
sorry, while we're to break, I just had a question, I guess. So, I saw you mention a minute ago that cabins are the most popular thing, and I assume they're revenue generating too, right?
They are, yes, sir.
So, Mr. Chairman, for the question.
Senator Survey.
So, I know there was I think it's part of Phase 3 at Widewater is to build cabins. Is there any sense amongst the department that given that cabins are what people want and there's cabins that could be built and that cabins can generate revenue, whether that ought to be prioritized as part of, future capital spending in addition to the maintenance backlog?
Mr. Chairman, Senator, I don't think that there is currently anything floating around for cabin construction at Phase 3 of Widewater at the moment. Frank, is that?
Well, it's Phase 2 or 3. I don't know
think
which it is.
Overnight lodges, excuse me.
Sorry, Frank Stovall is our Deputy Director of Operations. He has state parks under his portfolio.
Chairman, Senator, so cabins and overnight lodging, including campground, is part of Phase 3 master plan.
Right.
It is included in the agency's long-range capital request.
Mr. Chairman?
Senator Survey.
Right. I think you guys just restated what I said, but my question was, doesn't it make sense to prioritize the construction of cabins before other things if that's the most popular thing state parks do and it generates money? That was my question.
Sure. Mr. Chairman, Senator Suravel, we have prioritized, I think, to a significant degree, repairing existing cabins to try to preserve that maintenance flow, to preserve that revenue flow. So that is something that we look at. I think in terms of constructing cabins, it's a balance between the existing maintenance backlog, the cost of constructing cabins, our staff capacity to staff those cabins, and a number of other factors. But we are, I think, cognizant of the fact that these are significant revenue generators. And I think we can, I'm happy to provide you with a more detailed breakdown of sort of what is on the horizon for priority non-deferred maintenance projects. I've got a list of the deferred maintenance, but looking at sort of actually building stuff, we've got a list for that too.
Yep.
I'm happy to get that over to you.
Matt, and I assume too, some of that deferred maintenance involves issues around safety.
It does.
And what have you, which would have to be prioritized around, before the construction of revenue-producing cabins and what have you have to take care of that first.
We try to fix what we've got first. I will say, and I've got a couple of slides on this later when we get into the capital and construction, because of sort of the nature of the way the money comes in, right? You all appropriate funds. We tend to put a lot of things out there that might be considered to be a menu. So it's not as, it perhaps appears to you all not as targeted as it could be internally. I would say that one of the things that we are really trying to do is to tighten up our capital allocation, our maintenance process. We have an RFP out for sort of a capital maintenance system. We are working on doing a better job of inventorying what we have, all to try to get some more, I think, quantitative measures around these, where we're looking at ROI, where we're looking at things like that, into what is right now a fairly qualitative process.
Right, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Servo.
Thanks. The whole maintenance capital thing has vexed me for 8 years now. I mean, I've represented 3 state parks until redistricting. Now I only got 1, but and Widewater, I was there to cut the ribbon with Senator Stewart. I stood next there when there was nothing there but some woods, and we're almost done with phase 1. But for the last 4 years, I've been advocating to fund the maintenance backlog. And the pushback I get is that you could throw $300 million at us, but we can't deploy it because we don't have the capacity to bid out enough projects to actually do it. And so therefore, we don't want all $300 million. And so, which kind of makes me scratch my head.
I don't know that I said that, but
No, maybe you didn't say it, but I get feedback from staff, whatever, that Parks doesn't want the money or can't handle it if we send it to them or something. And Michigan basically took their ARPA money and funded their entire backlog. And so the frustration I have is I'd like to see a plan to get this done while I'm still in the legislature, and also build out the remaining phases we have at our park system so that people can start enjoying these assets. Because like in Stafford, Widewater, there's a lot of demand for it. And I just like this, if there could be a plan at some point soon, because there's a lot of demand.
Sure.
Senator
So-
Servo, if I might, just before you answer, Matt, is that, we have such operational shortfalls, that being able to do a lot of this work is impacted by that. I have a bill in this year to try to make up for the $111 million they're short in terms of being able to be fully operational with the park system.
And that's been your baby for the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
so.
yeah, it is. It is a question of maintenance and operations and what kind of programs they can do in the parks. But anyway, Matt, go ahead and please answer Senator Servo, and then we have Senator Favola has a question.
Mr. Chairman, Senator Servo. So what we've got here is sort of the top 10 capital projects that we put in for this year in DPB's system. These are prioritized, you can see, and then a list of the deferred maintenance backlog, what was funded in the 23 budget, and what would potentially be in the next tranche if we got another 45 million. I don't, this isn't written in stone, but hopefully gives you a sense that we are prioritizing and that we do have a plan for this. I would say, just if I could move forward a little bit, because I think I may touch on some of these in some of the other slides. But so looking at the service gaps that we have, I think one of the big ones is maintenance. And it's not just the maintenance backlog. That is a significant part of it. But it is also staff capacity. So right now, we have 56-ish capital projects in process, and I have 5 project managers available for those projects. And so that's more than 10. The industry standard is usually like 6 to 8. At the agency's peak, when we were, I think, deploying a lot of the bond money that was put out in 2001, I want to say, I think the agency had something closer to 30. And so that creates a significant choke point in terms of being able to get the money out. I will also say that getting something built in the state process can be lengthy. You're looking at 36 months from the date of when the project starts, not when it's appropriated, but when the project actually starts to finish. And so that can drag things out too. And I share the senator's frustration. And we've got a great team, and they're working their tails off. But to a certain extent, there's only so much that a team of 5 can do. So we're exploring options on that. I think if we, in order to address this gap, I think we would look to bring on more project managers to try to accelerate that. Senator, did that get a little bit to your question? I think the other thing that I wanted to flag on maintenance is that there are things that we can try to do to get ahead of the backlog, right, to try to address stuff so that it doesn't get to that phase. So one of the things that we have discussed is having some dedicated maintenance personnel to have some trade techs that work for the agency so that we're not necessarily bidding out some of these smaller projects that we have to contract with now because most of our folks are generalists. Right? We don't have a lot of trade. We've got expertise, but they're not trade techs. So we think bringing some of that expertise in-house, being able to address some of these things before they turn critical, is an important part to making sure that we don't get back into the state that we are now. Just kind of clicking through the rest of this, again, I mentioned.
I have a question from Senator Favola.
Oh, sorry.
I appreciate your very thorough presentation.
Sure.
But I just have a very sort of simple question. You know, we do charge fees to use our parks. And of course, I don't want the fee to be so high it's a barrier. I want people to use our parks, and I don't want price costs to them to be a barrier. But I'm just curious, how much of your maintenance budget, how much is actually paid for through these fees, or is it so insignificant that you need 90% to be appropriated from the state?
I would say that the availability of self-generated maintenance funds is relatively small. So most of what we're able to do is either because you all have appropriated specific capital dollars for it, or because we do get a maintenance reserve appropriation.
Yes.
That's been about $3.5 to $4 million per year. It's at 8.5 in the proposed budget, which is fantastic.
Yeah.
But I think most of our operational funding goes to funding operations. And
It's not backlog of maintenance.
There's some small maintenance in there, but most of these projects are significant enough.
So your
that they-
day-to-day operations of just maintaining staff. Okay, got it.
Yes, ma'am. Again, we are able to do some small maintenance items with them, but nothing. The stuff that is on this list is on there because it's a pretty big, significant project. Yep, it's not something that a park ranger can fix going to Lowe's and loading up on some lawnmower. One of the other items that we would potentially look to beef up is our law enforcement. So currently, we have 100 law enforcement rangers for 8 million visitors and 75,000 acres. In 2022, we had 7,200 calls for assistance. So that equates to one park ranger LE call every 78 minutes and one law enforcement ranger for each 74,000 guests. So trying to beef that up to make sure that our parks remain safe. Access and accessibility, Senator Favola, you mentioned fiscal barriers, right? We don't want to price ourselves out of the market. We are in the service delivery business. If this were the private sector and I had an incredibly popular product and very limited demand, I'd probably raise my prices. But that's not what we want to do here. We're also aware of physical barriers, right, for individuals who are handicapped or older, and then proximity and availability, right? Are you near enough to a park to get to it? Is the park available? Is there overnight lodging available? Is there day use capacity available? And then certainly protecting the resource is important as well. Getting a little bit more into the deferred maintenance end of things, when I came before the committee last year, we talked about the $364-ish million maintenance backlog. You all appropriated $87 million in the 23-24 budget, which is fantastic. That knocked it back to about $277 million. Inflation and time have started to creep that back up to around $300 million. So there is a time premium or a time penalty to this. I mentioned some of the projects that we have now. So we are busy deploying the money. Again, I know it sort of looks like a black box from the outside, but this is about 56 projects across the system. You can see some of it is development, right? Visitor center construction. A lot of it is bathhouse repair, cabin renovation and repair, replacing staff residences. So trying to address the experience to keep it safe and enjoyable for everyone. So this totals about $110 million that is actively in process for projects. But again, to give you a sense, we have some roofing repairs that are on the deferred maintenance list. We submitted authorization to start in October, and we're still waiting to hear back on that. So that kind of gives you a sense on the timeline. We also do have the maintenance reserve portion of things. Again, these are the projects that we would fund out of the $3.5 million or $8.5 million. Frankly, a lot of the maintenance reserve winds up going to emergencies, right? Drain field fails, tree falls on a roof, somebody sets a cabin on fire, we got to fix it. this is a lot of times where we go to fix it. So you can see some dredging there, some roof replacements, wastewater and sewer system repairs as well. So before I leave sort of the capital portion of the presentation, I just wanted to pause and see if there were any additional questions on that. Okay.
One quick question.
Yep.
Senator Serba.
Mr. Wells, do you know that, has the state ever run a bond initiative? I know we've done on higher ed. Have we ever done a bond initiative on state park capital ever, last 3-4 decades? I don't remember one, but.
We did one, was it 2001? 2002. It's close. We did one in 2002. We have not done one since. There is also authority in statute for the DCR director to issue revenue bonds around specific park construction. Those bonds have to be paid for out of the revenues generated by whatever it is that you're building. And so we're looking at that right now. It's difficult to make the financials work and keep our, to keep our price point in kind of the still delivering service arena. But that is something that has not been done in quite a while. I'll just probably leave it there.
Proceed.
How big was that?
Oh gosh, do you remember?
It was, I believe it was 117 million.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
We can get you more information.
All right,
on
thanks.
That. Yes, sir.
Yeah, now let's move quickly through it. We do have Director.
All right. Just wanted to flag, we also have 66 natural area preserves. People are going to those too. Visitation was 200,000 in the last year. So these are dedicated to biodiversity, but people are finding them, they're hiking through them, they're enjoying them. Real quick in the budget, there's funding for 3 parks, two to stand up, 1 to increase operations where we only have 2 folks, funding for firefighting equipment for natural heritage, who helped put out all those forest fires with DOF this year using antiquated equipment. Some additional funding for law enforcement, for breaks, to study the potential acquisition of Oak Hill, which is James Monroe's house in Loudoun County, where he wrote the Monroe Doctrine, along with about 1,200 acres of land, and then money to cover the Virginia National Guard Park Pass. There is a little bit of capital funding, $3 million to mitigate underground storage tanks, some NGF to acquire land, 1.6 million for climate control and yurts, and then the 8.5 million I mentioned for maintenance reserve. All right, so I'm going to try to fly through the water side of the house real fast. All right, Community Flood Preparedness Fund is the Commonwealth's primary means of providing money to localities to mitigate flooding. We've had 3 rounds so far, put out about $97 million in funding to local governments. About 2/3 of that's gone to low-income localities across the 3 rounds, and then backing out what we put out in round 4, there's about $128 million remaining available in the fund. You can see where the awards went. Round 4, we put out for $85 million in total, 50 million in grants, 25 million in long-term loans, 10 million in short-term loans. We got applications for $76 million in funding, all for grants. We pulled the advisory review committee together. They made recommendations to approve 48 projects for $50 million, which is the max. Those are sitting with the secretary and me right now. Since we didn't get any applications for loans, which isn't super surprising because it's the first year we've done that, we may see if there are some people who didn't make the cut for grants that might be interested in a loan. We also had the first round of the revolving fund, which we have geared towards more property scale projects and non-federal match versus the community scale, Community Flood Preparedness Fund. Put out $18.5 million in this most recent round. We're successful in drawing down $6 million in federal funding that'll support 4 projects, and then we received 1 application to support a local flood resilience revolving fund. Based on feedback we got, we are going to reopen this round and accept applications on a rolling basis through the end of June for non-federal match and the hazard mitigation of buildings. We've done a lot of things with transparency that a certain bill from a certain chairman is going to codify, hopefully. Great bill. Dam safety grant. We do have a round open for the dam safety grant, $10.6 million to help bring people into compliance with dam safety regs and to mitigate some structural issues. This fund has been undersubscribed in the past because match requirements are pretty high at 50%. So there is some legislation this year that would lower those matches for us to be able to get more money out. Office of Environmental Ed, you all restarted this in the last budget. That's going strong, working on developing the environmental literacy plan, put out almost $400,000 in meaningful watershed education experience grants. And then just really quickly looking at the budget, the governor's proposed budget would fully fund the state share of the ag needs assessment for the fourth year, I believe, third year running. It's got $166 million for ag BMPs, $15.8 million for soil and water district technical assistance, and then $19 million for specific programs. And then other items in the budget, $100 million for the Community Flood Preparedness Fund, $25 for the revolving fund, $5 million for the dam safety fund, 6 additional FTEs for the dam safety program because we have not a lot of engineers. We have 5 engineers covering 2,500 dams, $74 million in pass-through for Norfolk's Coastal Storm Risk Management Project, some support for local soil and water districts. That was a whirlwind tour of the water side of the agency. And that's Oak Hill on your left, and that's Buffalo Mountain on your right.
Great, thank you. Yeah, Matt, what is the total amount of general fund money that goes into the park system?
The total amount of general fund money, it's about 28 million, right? To general fund to the parks. Correct. Yeah, about 28 million.
Okay.
And then 30-ish that we self-generate.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep. It's been, I've got a couple of follow-ups and some homework to do, so we'll be back with more info.
All right, thank you so much.
Thank
Any
you.
other questions from the committee? Matt, thank you very much, and thanks
Thank
for
you.
the wonderful job that you and the folks do at DCR. We really appreciate it, and love to be able to provide you with more funding to do what we need to do. But I'm just glad to see that people are using the parks, and that's sort of a good problem to have, and hopefully an incentive for the Finance Committee to do something to help you deal with these folks who want to take advantage, and I thank you for your time today.
Certainly appreciate the support. Thank you.
All right, there we go. And next up, Director Rolband from the Department of Environmental Quality.
Okay.
Mike, how are you?
Good afternoon. Great. How are you, Senator?
Good to have you here. Please proceed.
I'm glad to follow Matt. When I took this job, I went to a retirement party for David Paler, and I learned from several ex-governors and directors that the best job in the state is the director of DCR, and the worst is being the director of DEQ. But I'm having fun still. So as soon as you can put my slides up, I'm gonna give you basically an update on our programs as well as the budget. Okay, thank you. So the first slide, we have roughly 850 people now. And so a lot of people get confused as to what we do. And simply, we regulate air quality, water quality, and land. We also have a regulatory affairs and outreach portion as well. Our mission is to protect and enhance the environment of Virginia in order to promote the health and well-being of the Commonwealth citizens, residents, and visitors in accordance with applicable laws and regulations. And that mission has been constant for quite some time. This is our executive structure org chart. Alvy Edwards, the Director of Administration, is here today, back here, in case I stumble on some questions, particularly on the budget side. But we've reorganized a little bit, and we're probably more efficient in terms of I have a Chief Deputy, Alex Sams, retired colonel from the Army Corps. We have a Director of Administration, Director of Policy, Brandon Bull, who you've met, Director of Operations. So we've consolidated the regions and the central office operations under one person so they can be less siloed. Melanie Davenport's the Director of Regulatory Affairs and Outreach, and then our Director of IT Security, that's a mandate. We have 7 offices, 6 regions, and 1 central office. This is a map that shows them all. And our functions are broken out into permitting and compliance enforcement, grants and loans, monitoring, planning, and outreach. So just to hit a few of the main highlights, first of all, we have the air program. And so they're focused on permitting for anything that affects air, compliance with those permits, monitoring overall air quality. And Northern Virginia, of course, as at least 3 of you know, we also do car emissions that We inspect roughly 4,000 cars a day, and I only get about 40 complaints a month. So it's not too bad. Most don't get to me. Air data analysis and planning and air quality assessments. The next division is our land division. And basically, they're responsible, number one, for all the waste management in terms of all the landfills. We also have remediation programs, so basically all the brownfields. Then spill response and remediation, particularly in oil, and then permitting and compliance as well. And lastly, the third division is the water protection division. So it has three main elements: water planning, water permitting and compliance, and clean and finance. So that is, again, a slight reorganization. We have all the water programs now reporting to the same person. They used to be distributed, and they didn't always work so well in terms of working together versus being siloed. So I want to tell you that DEQ is doing great, okay? And we truly are. So first of all, one thing we've done is we've staffed up. There's roughly 75 more people now since I came here. Actually, yeah, 78. That's simply for one thing. We had the money. They just were very slow in going through the hiring process. When I first got here, it would take sometimes 6 months to get the forms to me to sign off to start the hiring process. So we've changed things. We basically use our computer systems now. Things are online, and if it takes a week, I get upset. And so we've dramatically shrunk that hiring process, and we're almost full. I mean, we theoretically could have a few more people. We're right on the edge of having not enough money.
Mr.
Now-
Chairman.
Yes.
Senator Surratt.
Thanks. I'm in the middle of reading the Milliken Rizal book, and I just got through the George Allen chapter, which brought back memories of the big cuts to DEQ back in the mid-'90s. Are we back at that same staffing level we were at back then, do you know? Or
No. My recollection is that in 31 years ago, there was roughly 800 people. Since then, we've brought in the Chesapeake Bay Department from DCR and the Stormwater Program. They hit a high of around 1,200, and it shrunk, as you can see before I got here, to 768.
Okay,
But
thanks.
You're welcome. So one thing I've done is I've clarified our goal, and you might see the familiarity here with the Chesapeake Bay Preservation Act, Taylor Murphy's preamble, and basically I borrowed from his language. A healthy environment, a healthy state and local economies of Virginia are integrally related. Balanced economic development and the protection of our environment are not mutually exclusive. And that's a new thing. We didn't have a goal, and that is our goal. So I started here with 4 initiatives, and we've recently added a 5th. The main initiatives, number 1 is One DEQ. We were operating as basically 6 regional offices and a central office, independently doing things differently and not sharing resources. Okay, we are changing that. We have changed it. We have in place a little program I'll tell you about. The second was PEEP. And phase 1 is completed, and that was basically a scheduling program I'll tell you more about to simply provide to the public total transparency of every permit we process, what the steps are to go through the process, and where it stands. It's online on our website. Phase 2 was 3 more groundwater withdrawal permits. That will be done April 1st. We had to wait till the next reporting period is over to put that online, but it's complete. The third one is the source of roughly 80% of all the complaints when I got here, and that's the stormwater program. And I'll tell you more about it, but basically the last step was approved earlier today, and it's gone to town hall. And then fourth, we'd like to try to address the commodity trading platform. We're getting ready to put out an RFP for this, and this was the result of Lee Ware's direction 2 years ago to have a study group to look at what's happening, why we have such delays in mitigation. I'll tell you more about that. Now, the new thing we've just started, Alex Sams, my chief deputy, I put him in charge of training, okay? We have to have media-specific training, certification, and more interns. So we've been hiring we've been announcing and interviewing interns. We've got a lot of interest, and we are starting certification programs. Today was the first one in wetlands, for example. It's a 6-series webinar. Over 500 people came. So we're amazing interest in media-specific training. That's to bring our staff up to speed and the public sector or the private sector up to speed and have them train together to learn from each other. So it's our new initiative. It's based on what the ESI, Engineering Surveys Institute, has done very successfully. We want to do the same thing. So real quick DEQ, or one DEQ, it's the people collaborate together and share workload. So we're using our PEEP system for the first time. We actually know what our workload is. This is focused primarily, obviously, in the permitting programs, and it's working already. PEEP is a schedule. So this is just an example of one of the screens. And the number one thing is transparency, and it's a project management tool. So the gray is the schedule, and the colors are different, what's happening in that process. So in this case, the application review, it wasn't a complete application. It was sent back to the applicant. It came back. It still wasn't complete. We're still waiting. Now, there were enough information to coordinate with DCR in this case and DWR, so that's already completed. But because the applicant hasn't responded, the target date is being revised, and that's the blue line. We now go to every program, DEQ only and DEQ overall, and we're getting a grade. And if you meet the schedule or beat the schedule 90 to 100% of the time, you get an A. Overall, you'll see when I just did this recently, DEQ is getting all A's for our part, but the program itself, in terms of total permits, it's not getting a good grade. It's because of other factors that I'll show you. And we can drive this down to every program. We can do it to every permit type, 122 types right now, and to the individuals. That part is, of course, not public, but this is. And what you'll see on our public-facing website is the source of the delays. The light blue is the schedule. It's a weighted average. This is the overall everything. The dark blue is what's happening. And you'll see the biggest delays, applicants, and the Army Corps. And we are working with the applicant side on better education. We have completeness checklists now for every type of permit on our web, so people know upfront what's required. Technology. When I got here, believe it or not, we did not have broadband internet at any DEQ offices, including Northern Virginia, that permits the majority of the data center traffic in the United States. As of 2 weeks ago, we now have broadband. Okay, the last office. It's been a painful process. It's still not as good as I can get at my house in Richmond, for example, gig speed, but we are now getting 100 megabits per second. It's a tragic lack of investment. We had a system that was the same thing I had in my office in 1995. We now have Wi-Fi. They didn't have Wi-Fi. We now have conference rooms. We can have hybrid meetings. None of that existed. So we've had a major initiative. Alvy was the leader of that, so that our people can be more efficient and effective. They were living in technology that's 25 years old. The next thing we're focusing on is our database system that runs the agency. It was last updated in 2003. Okay, imagine not updating your phone for 20 years. So we are implementing a new platform with Oracle. We're already on an Oracle system, and that is being done so we can then hopefully start an electronic permitting system called Opal, again, using that platform, but we couldn't do it using 20-year-old technology that wasn't even supported by Oracle anymore. So we were in danger of not having a computer system. So I talked about stormwater. This was what went to the town hall today. The biggest problem with stormwater is that the first book we used, parts of it was published in 1989. The green book was 1992. The blue books were 99. And then we added all sorts of guidance documents and manuals and updates. We never consolidated it. This came from DCR, as you know, in 2014. So luckily, I moved to Virginia '85, and I've lived with all these things, and I can have a good memory. But the biggest source of the problem with all the delays and complaints in stormwater was we don't have one consolidated handbook. So we have published, well, we will be publishing, it just got approved. It'll be on Encode Plus platform, so it's a digital platform, so it can be updated. We have a standing committee every 6 months. We'll take comments during the 6 months and then review them and make updates. So we have a living document that stays up to date with the science and engineering and regulations, and end a lot of the confusion that's delayed everything. So now, turning to money, unless there's any questions. We have several funds that you've probably, and I know Senator Stewart was interested in, the WQIF fund. And this is just a quick summary. It was enacted by the General Assembly in '97 to finance nutrient reduction in the Chesapeake Bay and its tributaries. The next fund is our revolving loan fund. And that's exactly what it does. We work through VRA. They're the financial manager of this. We review the applications and make recommendations, and the actual loan processing is handled through VRA, Virginia Resource Authority, which I'm on the board. And this doesn't want to click. Oh, there it is. And then we have ARPA money. We have a bunch of ARPA money that is addressing both CSOs and wastewater projects, and we're working on allocating this money and obligating it to different groups. Yes, sir. A lot. There might be another slide on that, but the other week we were at almost $500 million to go. We are not making good progress in this. And so what we're doing, Alvi is actually helping right now, and we're getting outside help because we've just got to get this moving faster. And we have to get it moving faster. Yeah.
What areas do you need the movement in?
Well, we need a combination of, number one, our staff have to be moving faster, so we need help, which they're working on. We've got some new staff, and we're going to get some outside resources as well. But then also we have to get local governments doing their part. We've had a bunch of situations where they have to fill out the information, they have to apply, or some of these things we've had, issues where the General Assembly has told us to give money, but it's a reimbursement. And if the people don't spend the money and give us the application, we can't give them the money. So we've had many go to their legislators, particularly last year, demanding that we write checks for millions and millions of dollars. But the wording, it's a reimbursement. And so if it's a reimbursement, that means they have to pay for it first. And they just wanted the money and no application.
Will you be using, to catch up with this work, using paid consultants who would be
Yes.
doing some of that work? How much do you anticipate of the $500 million would be spent outside?
We are just simply, they had 2 meetings in the last week, and I don't believe we've come to any budget yet.
Okay.
We've also hired some former employees that are retired as, back part-time to help and organizing. So part of this Oracle database upgrade is things just weren't handled in the past. Any of our financial grants and loans, they weren't handled in an environment that could be tracked. It was simply done with spreadsheets. And so they are not up to date, and so we're trying to get it all into the 21st century.
Yeah. Is there any of the ARPA money that can be clawed back if it's not spent?
Yes.
In a period of
Yeah.
time?
For June 30th is the date in the governor's budget, was the end of the year. Yeah,
And how much is vulnerable to that, do you think?
about 500 million.
Vulnerable to being clawed back?
Yeah.
Well, there's about 70 million in projects that the localities are kind of waffling on right now that we're in negotiations and continued conversations with, that they're hoping to have an agreement in place by March on those dollars. If not, find a different purpose. And they're researching different purposes now so that we can redeploy those dollars.
Okay, thank you.
But otherwise, it's things that are unobligated. So we're trying hard and we're pushing. But this is definitely the area we're not performing as well. So SLAF grants, I think you know what those are, but that is another financial program. We obligated the majority of the money we had this last round, and we'll see what's in the budget for next time. So the clean water financing, kind of a summary. We have the Water Quality Improvement Fund, and we have 538 million in applications and 170 with active agreements. The revolving fund, we received 38 applications for a total of 612 million. We only had funding available for 189.5 million. And then the ARPA money, there's 580,000 authorized, or 580 million authorized. There was, at the time of this slide, a couple weeks ago, it was 138 million obligated. We're obligating more as fast as we can, but that's the money that we have to get obligated. SLAF grants, we have unobligated 38 million. We anticipate about 35 to be applied for right now. We recently gave a report to the Water Commission. Senator Serval was the chairman, or is the chairman. We described our unmet needs that based on a survey of $10.8 billion. And it's a fair amount. Most of it is typically funded at the local level, some federal and some state that's shown on here. That's just based on averages in the past. So our base budget, We have financial assistance, water protection, administration, land protection, air. This shows you the splits on a percentage basis of our total budget. This next one shows you where we're getting the money. So general fund is 30.9% of it. Federal money is 24.2. We haven't had any significant increase in that in a while. Then we have revenue sources, special revenue sources, and petroleum storage tank, and then of course Title V air permits. So when, one thing that Matt mentioned, it's the same issue we have when you increase our general fund or when we give people a raise. We're only getting a raise in the general fund portion, but we have to make up for that. And that's another reason why our MEL is 900 and pushing 1,000, but we can only fund 800 and something. These are the items in the governor's introduced budget. I don't know if you want to go through those or not. I think you're probably very familiar with them.
Mr. Rolban, I had a question. Yeah, Mr. Chairman, sorry. So on your funding here, back at, I guess, slide 27,
Okay.
which color on here was for the solid waste fees?
That's number 4, the red.
Number 4.
Protection.
Land protection, okay. And I don't know if you recall, but I had a bill last year, which was the product of a work group where all the landfills and waste people all got together and decided that the fee structure ought to be modified so that you all be better supported in doing your job regulating the industry. And there was a consensus, and then we had the shift in the administration. Have you all had an epiphany about whether or not we ought to look at those fees again that the industry was willing to pay?
You'd have to talk to Travis, the Secretary of Natural Resources, about that.
Okay, I met with him the other day. I forgot to bring it up, but I'll bring it up. All right, thanks.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
I had a question in a second. So you talked a minute ago about the $10 billion of, what was it, projects?
Unmet needs. So that's it's a survey of all local governments, what they will need in the next 20 years.
Right. Mr. Chairman, for the question.
Senator Servo.
So my recollection, and just make sure my recollection's right, your testimony from like 2 months ago was that we might sort of be getting to the point where the monies we spend towards those 10 billion might be not getting as much bang for the buck, or am I focused on a different pot of money?
Yeah, different pot of money. So
Was that the water
that
quality
was on
improvement
the
fund?
nutrient removal, right?
Okay. The 538 applications for 10 projects.
Correct.
Okay.
Like how,
Got it.
the 50 million dedicated to the Richmond combined sewer issue and what have you, how much of the problem, how much of the work is that going to be able to fund, because this is a multi-year project?
So their latest report that came a month or two ago was roughly just under $700 million total cost. So it's cut in half now from when they said it was $1.4 billion. They have $150 million right now approved for them that we haven't dispersed because it's a reimbursement. This budget proposed another $50 million. They will need basically close to $700 million. Their cash flow suggested they weren't going to be spending this money until 2027 and later. So they will need eventually a total of $700 million. 150 is already approved.
And the Alexandria project, how does that, how is that progressing?
That's progressing well. I went on a tour of it within the last couple of months, and when I was there, the tunnel was at 8,000 feet versus 11,500. I mean, it's going well. It's a little behind schedule, but it's remarkable how quick they've gone ahead.
Next time you go up there to take a look, why don't you let a bunch of us know in Northern Virginia? We'd love to
Sure.
to see what's going on there, and and be able to get that visualization, because we're going to be dealing with Richmond much longer than
Correct.
just the Alexandria thing. We, just want to get a handle on what all that looks like. So,
Yeah, I mean, they're doing a really good job. A lot of the people have moved over from the DC Clean Rivers program, so they had the advantage of being right next to another project that's actually much bigger, that's like very similar. So a lot of the same staff are there. I worked on the DC water project, so.
Well, Senator Stewart did some amazing work on making Alexandria happen. I didn't think it was possible to do what's been done.
No, they
but,
have a great manager, and Justin came over from DC Water, and from that consulting firm that's working there, and they're really getting it done.
Great. Thank you very much. Any other questions for Director Roban? All right. Kendra, anything else for us here? Huh? All right. Kendra, thank you for putting this together. We really appreciate it. If there's nothing else, Mike, thank you very much. And thank you for the work you're doing at DEQ, and subcommittee will rise.
The Senate of Virginia, Richmond, Virginia.